futures market for single-family homes at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, with the help, of course, of all the people at the CME. And we started it in 2006. Unfortunately, we started it when the housing market was dropping, and it may not have been optimal. We didn't have a huge success, but it is still going. This is a plot from a website that a market maker for the CME has called homepricefutures.com. You can see that down here, John Dolan. And it shows, as of December, the green is the futures prices. The black is the actual home prices that we saw. So what you can see is the market is expected to recover. It only goes out to 2017, but this, it looks like by 2018 or something, we should be back up to 2006 levels. But actually, the target inflation rate is 2% a year, so in real terms, it'll be 30% below the 2006 peak, even in 2018. Well, we're learning something from these markets. Markets haven't become, we were hoping that they would become influential enough that it would change the nature of the cash market, but that hasn't happened yet. So where am I here? Oh, this is just, there's, the way housing markets behave is already very speculative and very, it introduces a note of craziness to our lives. This is a plot of the relative price of homes in Los Angeles to a personal income index. So the level, it has a scaling problem, but you can see how much Los Angeles home prices went relative to people's income. They fell in half between 1987 and 1995. Then they almost doubled. Then they fell in half again. But people are, meanwhile, making decisions about whether to buy a house, whether to take an offer at UCLA or anything. My sister-in-law almost refused an offer at UCLA to be a professor there because she thought, she looked at houses and got profoundly depressed. She was in right around there. There's craziness in these markets, in my opinion. Eugene Fama doesn't seem to agree, but we'll leave that aside. So I produced a home price index for the United States going back to 1890, and that's the blue line here. The other lines shown are building costs, the building cost index in green, the population of the United States in lavender, and then the interest rates in gray, long-term interest rates. And to me, we learned so much from this plot. The thing that surprised me is that nobody had ever plotted a long-term home price index for any country until I did this. Now, it's not the most accurate index. It's the best I could do. But it gives you a picture of, first of all, what an enormous event we just had right here. Okay, right up there. It was unprecedented in U.S. history. The history before that, nobody remembers because we're not used to looking at it. There's nothing like it. There's only this thing right here, this boom. You know what this boom is called? I'm asking my class. What's the name of this boom? The baby boom, yeah. That's what they called it back then. They said, well, the men are coming home from World War II. They want a two-bedroom house. They don't want to keep the baby in the same room. And so it caused a boom in home prices. You haven't forgotten the boom, but most people don't think about these data. So they didn't know, they didn't have perspective on what was going on here in the 80s. And that's part of the reason why the financial crisis has gotten so bad. So I think that what has happened as a result of this kind of research is that we have had a behavioral finance revolution. And this is something that is big here at Yale. But it goes back, I have it back here on my slides as starting with Émile Durkheim in France in 1893. But actually, did you know that the first sociology course ever offered in the United States was offered at Yale University in the 1860s or 70s? by William Graham Sumner, who was an economist here, who was also interested in sociology. In fact, he kind of made sociology. I think that it's fundamentally relevant to understanding financial markets. Also, social psychology. Irving Janis was at the Yale psychology department. Here's where I'm different. I'm boosting Yale here, sorry. I didn't do this in Stockholm. But I did have the same slides in Stockholm. Irving Janis wrote a remarkable book in 1971 called Groupthink, about how organizations get confused. Now we have organizational behavior. It's developing into a whole science. But organizations of experts can mess up, and that helps explain why the financial crisis got as bad as it did. People are always asking, why didn't the experts see it coming? Well, I think you have to think about groupthink to understand that. Then there's selective attention. William James, Christopher Sims, rational inattention. We don't have time to pay attention to everything that's relevant. But we don't. The news media are phenomena that are extremely important for understanding the stock market, I believe. It's an amplifier of social epidemics. And lots of things are relevant, even population biology. Richard Prum, now at the Yale Biology Department, is writing a book that was relevant to finance. He sees evolutionary biology and analogies. Epidemiology in the medical school is about how diseases spread, and I think the same thing is relevant to how bubbles form in markets. Neuroeconomics is coming into focus as an important field. We have a number of people here at Yale who are interested in that. I think I'm just about done. I just wanted to say at the end that I just believe in looking at the real world and not idealizing it. So it's not perfect. People are a social animal. They're very amenable to suggestion. They can make big mistakes. History is filled with examples of that. And yet, financial markets will reflect those mistakes, and they won't do things exactly right. But on the other hand, what we've learned in history is that financial markets they seem to be associated with success and prosperity and freedom and self-expression. They're associated with some negative things as well, but most people in the world are interested in participating in financial capitalism. I closed in my lecture, this is exactly what I showed then, with my book, Finance and the Good Society, which was published last year. But I didn't want to make too much of it because they didn't mention it in their scientific background. So I didn't know if they liked that book. But I thought I have to say it because I believe that finance is the infrastructure for our civilization. It's about achieving goals. It's also organizations. So I like the original name for the School of Management, School of Organization and Management. I like that because the word management sounds like it's coming down from the top. And organization, it sounds like we value the top guys, but we value everyone in the organization. And it's part of how it all works together. So the good society is a society in which we have organizations that do things that we believe in and that coordinates our activity. That's what management is really about. And I believe in that, even though I also think that it's not always going to work right and there's going to be craziness. I'll stop with that. We have questions?
Stock markets, relationship or really anything else beyond that, I'm sure both of you will take questions. There's some microphones around the room, so first bring the microphone. Even you have to wait for the microphone.
So, Nick, you prompted me by suggesting I could ask a question about Professor Schiller's relationship with Professor Fama, whom I also knew in my old job.
Oh, yeah, you must have known
So-
him.
So, I'm already looking forward to Sunday to read about your evaluation of the dispute. But you mentioned one area where you agree, which is the everyday person. It's very hard for that person to make a lot of money fast by investing. And I've heard Professor Fama say also that if you're an everyday person, it may also be hard to find somebody really smart, like you or Nick or Shane here, who's sort of a guru, possibly, and pay them and have that work as well. But I haven't
Right.
heard you weigh in on that topic. Even though markets are inefficient, can I get somebody who's maybe smarter than me to help
Right,
me?
right. There's a lot of issues here. One of them is you might think that the smart money would be able to extract all of the benefit from their being smart. Well, it's a competitive world. Everyone wants the smart money, and so they bid up their fees. There's limits to that. So Andre Schleifer wrote a famous paper showing that the problem is that people can't prove they're smart. And well, that's what you're saying. And that it takes, they try to prove they're smart by their track record. But it takes 30 years or 50 years. No one knows whether it was chance or not. And after 30 years or 50 years, you might have lost your competitive edge. And just by then, you've proven it. So there are problems. Now, when you bring up Fama, I hope I didn't make an enemy of him, because he seems to be an easygoing guy. I think we're still friends. But I was doing this, it was a whole Nobel week, and I kept being paired with him in front of different, including a high school, inner city high school. I didn't argue with him there, but everywhere else I argued with him. And I kept bringing up dimensional fund advisors, which is his student, David Booth, founded it, like, was it 30 years ago? A long time ago. And Booth Booth applied Eugene Fama's principles to investing and was very successsul. In fact, DFA now has assets under management of about $350 billion, which makes it a major investment fund. They've done that because they're so successful. By the way, also, David Booth wanted to make a gift to his, maybe you were dean when this happened. I'll rephrase it. Ted Snyder was very persuasive and got David Booth. Now, by the way, I met David Booth at the Nobel event. He was there. Everyone was, all of our close friends were there. But, now, I think David told me, if I remember right, and I'm a little confused, so many things happen. I think he said that he wanted to name it the Fama School. Maybe you don't want to, at least he thought of naming the Chicago Business School the Fama School. But then they didn't like it, naming a business school after an acting professor. So I said, okay, name it after me instead. I don't know if I got the history exactly right. But DFA is one powerful success. Now, Gene kept coming up to me. He tried this for a while, and he found that it didn't work. He said, Bob, if you're so good at identifying bubbles, I want you to tell me when it's going to burst. But my retort to that, which I perfected over the days, was to say, what are you looking at me for? You did it. The DFA investment strategy is partly a value investing strategy. So they can identify underpriced stocks, and they're doing it all the time. I didn't say that I can identify exactly when a bubble would burst, but yeah, the whole bubble theory suggests you should do something like DFA. By the way, I wrote this in a New York Times op-ed for the Sunday business section last December. And I put in an original line saying, well, I even recommend DFA to investors. So Gene and I are on the same wavelength. We just invest differently. But then I called my editor and I said, I think I shouldn't be recommending investments. But then my editor said, no, that works really well. So he put it back in. So I don't know. But I actually do believe in Gene Fama. And he's a smart, quantitative guy. He just has a sort of ideology that's associated with Chicago. And, but smart people can survive ideological biases and do much the right thing anyway. So
Okay, I think perhaps we've exhausted the topic of Bob Schiller and Gene Fama. Perhaps there's a question on a slightly different topic. There seems to be a question at the back there.
Professor Schiller, do you have an opinion on how high-frequency trading affects volatility?
Okay, well, high-frequency trading, we often talk about something like millisecond trading. Well, I don't have my instinct is that it really doesn't matter one way or another. But I can't prove this because, of course, it has psychological effects and everything to it. But I met one trader who told me, he said, well, it's like we used to use slide rules and now we use calculators. So it used to be that you had to get your trade in within a few minutes or maybe a minute, okay? But now it's millisecond, and now we have a computer program, but it's all the same thing. He said, it hasn't changed. And so that's also, tell me if I'm wrong, there's no billionaire who made it by high-frequency trading, is there?
Yeah, Simon.
Who?
Simon. Renaissance. Rentec.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong on that. There's one. $1 billion isn't much these days.
Other questions? There seems to be one over there.
Yeah, thank you for your speech. And what do you think are the impacts of like Bitcoin's crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending on the financial markets on society? In the sense that we can view the Bitcoin as a new currency, and crowdfunding as a new kind of Wall Street, and peer-to-peer lending is kind of new commercial banking system. Thank you.
Bitcoins I think of as a bubble. But it's actually, there's some interesting encryption technology that underlies it. But and it's just people getting attracted to it because its price is going up. I'm going to have to speak at some event at the World Economic Forum next week. So I'll have about Bitcoin. So I'll have to brush up better on understanding just what's happening. But there's another theory that it supports criminal behavior because it allows anonymous transaction. But then people are telling me that, well, not really, because it's not foolproof. So, or maybe people thought that you could be a criminal using it. Crowdfunding, I have a very different opinion of. I think it's an interesting experiment that I don't know the outcome. But there's so many things happening that look like the beginnings of crowdfunding. Websites that allow you to, in effect, invest. Now, securities law has prevented them from really developing because they're worried about abuse of small investors. But you can get on websites that allow you to make loans to small farmers or to invest in a movie. The way it would work is someone would propose an idea for a new motion picture, and you could give $25 or something toward it. And then you'd be invited to some after-theater party or something if it launched. So it was basically a gift. But this kind of website might really transform into something big and important. So the Jobs Act in 2012 is trying to make it possible. So I think these are examples of innovations that Bitcoin is an experiment that I think is not very far along toward improving